Awesome. Super excited for everyone to be here. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Michael, for joining us as well. Very excited for this session about building a moat around your childcare business. Michael has a plethora of experience in marketing, has plenty of businesses that operate in different verticals, but childcare is one of them, and we're very lucky to have him speak here. Have talked a bit with him prior to this, and very knowledgeable individual, and very excited. So, Michael, thank you for joining us. And
No, my pleasure. All right, let's dive in. So quick intro, and then we'll jump right to the meat. So don't expect you to read anything verbatim. So we've got a global team. So our main company is called the Parent Marketing Group. We work with a couple hundred childcare centers across the US. I own a 9-location center, majority owner of that business. So in the trenches all day, every day, know the struggles of childcare centers. And we decided about 10 years ago, hey, we should also help them with the marketing. And that's just kind of spanned into a whole different directions. Written a bunch of fancy books, write for Forbes, Entrepreneur, etc. Don't say it to boast, but I'm all about you want to be taking advice and content from people that have been there, done that, not just like, hey, this is how you should market and grow a childcare center because they went to ChatGTP and learned a couple things. So I'm all about kind of vision and mission, and that's going to be kind of a central thing that we talk a little bit about when we go into this whole concept of building a moat. But our vision is really to continue to just help childcare center owners and directors thrive and stay in business. I'm going to share some metrics that a lot of you have probably either heard of or seen, or more importantly, are probably already feeling. But we're all about giving you the necessary tools to make sure that you can, again, stand the test of time. And that really, to me, is really going to be the secret sauce to this whole concept of building a moat. So when I look at, like, why do you need a moat? And I promise that the moat acronym will make sense in just a minute. Being not only in the trenches, but then having data across 300 plus childcare centers, things are getting harder and harder and harder. Nothing is getting easier. I mean, especially in the US, we have mainly almost all US clients, but we've got some in Europe and a handful in Australia. But regulations are continuing to increase. Parent expectations. I've got 4 kids myself. I live in Buffalo, New York, upstate New York. We're getting more and more demanding and just what we're expecting. The big one that pretty much everyone is feeling is all the economic pressures. And that could mean, I mean, staffing, how much it's costing you to get these people, how much your vendors are raising prices, and is that keeping up with essentially inflation? So there's a lot of craziness that's going on. And I'm not here to tell you that, in my opinion, based on everything that we're seeing, that anything is going to get easier. I'm actually here to tell you I think it's going to get tougher. However, the good news is you're showing up, you're here, and we're going to give you, here are the strategies that we're using day in and day out to make sure that our business isn't just here for the next couple of years, but for the next generation, my kids, my grandkids, etc. The other thing is, and this is not a knock against any kind of franchises, but there's a lot of really big franchises that are coming in, and they like to come in full guns blazing. They throw a ton of money at marketing. They throw a ton of money at advertising and making a big splash. And some of these are pretty challenging to compete with. But the good news is we can be a lot more nimble. So if you're an independent location, you're not necessarily beholden to, here's the exact step-by-step that you have to execute. This whole regulatory pressure thing, so we do a lot of surveys to our childcare center owners. So between the 300 that we're working with, I should have the exact number, but it probably makes up, if I were giving you a guess, close guess, probably 2,500 total locations amongst those. Most of the people we work with have at least 2, typically 3 to 5 locations. They're in the growth mindset. And we're constantly doing surveys. And they continue to push back and say, we can't keep up with all the compliance stuff. And hey, now all of a sudden we got to go do XYZ for the fire system. So the average kind of keeping up at one location, if you're already rolling, is upwards of $15,000. And it's just one of those that it continues to kind of smack you around a little bit. And kind of navigating these gets more and more complex, and just all the compliance in general. I mean, some of my least favorite days are when my team sends me a text and says, hey, we have a inspector or licensing showed up, or CPS is here, and all that fun stuff. So those are usually my least favorite days. This is another big one that, and I'm trying to paint the picture. So before I can just throw tactics and strategies at you, I'm all about kind of shifting mindset and starting to see kind of what's in front of me, and then more so, okay, great, what do I do now? Like, how do I, great, Michael's saying X, I can see this in my business. Great, now what do we actually do? So I want to paint that picture for you first. Demand wise, and it's not the demand that you're thinking of, demand of like, oh, more and more people need care. And that's definitely, the market's growing, and we're definitely continuing to see growth mode. However, the increasing expectations is one that I'm seeing it firsthand, uh, day in and day out. And it's could be big things like, hey, why doesn't this particular location have cameras? I know you have cameras, but why don't you allow us to log in and take a look at the cameras in real time? Why are you giving paper updates versus digital updates? Why don't we have multiple open houses? Like, the demands are getting steeper as people just are expecting more. One of the good reasons why, I mean, tools like Playground exist to make that aspect a little bit easier. Now, the other thing, and I hate even talking about this pandemic, however, we're still seeing to this day, 2024, that over 25-30% of locations are still experiencing issues from the pandemic. They had to take out extra loans. They got grants that they didn't realize were only to be used for certain things, or some that were a grant, but a grant that needed to be paid back. Like, there's still a lot of craziness that is still lingering. And then when you layer that on of, yikes, things have gotten more expensive. The average number that we're seeing is about 7%. Now, 7%, if you were to, Michael, is that the true number? That's the number that we're reporting on. If we were to survey every single childcare center across the US, I bet you that number would be closer to 12 to 15%. The other thing to keep in mind on the flip side of that is the cost of care for families. They're having to really make difficult choices. I mean, I don't live under a rock. I literally see this stuff all day, every day. And it's extremely difficult for some families to, I mean, they're living paycheck to paycheck, and there's no signs of anything like that, like magically improving overnight. There's one of the studies that we read recently, I think it was like what was it, Economic Policy Institute. I read all these boring surveys and studies. It's like saying that in 33 states, I mean, most families can't even afford to have care. So it just adds a lot of complexity to your business. And then when you layer on increased competition, I mean, some of these bigger providers, they're going to grab a lot of the market share. There's the days of you being the only game in town, the days of if you build it and they will come. Those have kind of been long over. I haven't, like, we used to ask, and we still ask it, but we'd say, oh, great, how do you get new business? How do you get new families? And they would either say referrals or word of mouth. And unfortunately, I mean, those are good tactics to be what I call the icing on the cake, but they're not marketing strategies. And it's not, unless you're in this rural area where there's no one else for 25 miles, but those days are few and far in between. Technology, this is, again, it is another great one, as a testament to apps and tools like Playground. You've got to make sure that you've got technology in your business. I mean, AI, I do tons of presentations on AI. That could be a 3-hour presentation. I mean, those things are going to continue to evolve and change the way that you're doing business. Now, what does all this mean? So I wanted to kind of paint a picture that things are getting more expensive, things are getting tougher by way of grabbing market share, getting people's attention, getting more and more enrollments. Technology costs are rising. The level of technology that's needed is growing. So you've got to get your house in order. And we have came up with this framework that I call building a moat. I'm a huge fan of acronyms, and I'm pretty casual, so it's gonna take a little. I'm like obsessed with this hint water. I had it like 2 or 3 years ago, and then forgot about it, and I think I've got like 200 bottles in my office. This concept of building a moat is to make it easy for you to remember, but these to us are the 4 areas that you need to master at your center or multiple location business. So marketing, operations, accounting, and team. Marketing, operations, accounting, team. And it's this whole concept of, in our view, unless you have these 4 things mastered, you're going to have a really tough time. I had a slide about how many centers are going out of business, either closing the doors, but unless you're living under a rock, you probably have seen a lot of centers that have just, nah, I'm done. Like the owners have just decided, yeah, I've kind of had enough. We're seeing that more at the rate the last 12 months. It has been greater than anything that we've seen in the last 10 years. And I wouldn't say in the last 10 years combined, but I probably would say 3 to 5 years. People are closing up shop, they're going out of business. And when I look at that, I've made it kind of my life's work to try and help eradicate small business failure. And we've studied, like, why are they going out of business? And it's one of these 4 areas is not necessarily in check or mastered. So marketing is the first one. Then I'll have a couple of slides on each. And if you have questions, throw them in the chat, and then we'll take a couple of questions at the end. I'm an open book, more than happy to brainstorm, strategize. This is what I do all day long, and it's my favorite thing to do. I always start with marketing. And my methodology and my approach has always been that you need to have a marketing first mentality. And so, Michael, I need the team first. Team is very important. It's one of the four aspects of building a moat. However, if you do not have systems to drive new enrollments, you're out of business. And at the end of the day, centers are closing for one of a couple of reasons. The primary reason is they're not making enough money, or they literally just ran out of cash. The other reason has been burnout. That's been the bigger reason, actually, as of late, that they weren't making a ton of money, but they weren't to the place where they had to file for bankruptcy or close up shop. But if you don't have systems to continue to drive new enrollments, keep your center full, build a wait list, you also then don't have a way to move to the next level, which is opening up another location and another location. And it's not that that's not everyone's cup of tea to have multiple locations, but we have found to actually build this into a business that can stand the test of time, you need at least 2 locations. Now, if you've got one and it's a large center, that's a different story. We have some centers that their capacity is 150, 180, even 200. They've got a gigantic 1 location center. But you typically start to hit certain levels of impact, and just a lot of stuff starts to click where you can invest more in marketing and team. You can pay your staff more when you have kind of the phrases economies of scale, basically, when you get that level of enrollments. On the O, I mean, this is all about your operations, standard operating procedures, your strategy. There's an aspect that we call the vivid vision exercise, where you kind of paint a picture, you paint a vision for the next 3 years. It's one of my favorite books. If you haven't read it, there's 2 of them that he's written. I actually think he's written more, but The book is Vivid Vision by a guy named Cameron Herold. The other book that he wrote way back when was Double Double. So he's the former chief marketing officer, or COO of 1-800-GOT-JUNK. But this book, this concept is about just painting a picture of what does the next 3 years look like at your center. How many locations? What families are you serving? What is the media talking about you? What are they saying? Like, what does everything kind of look like in general? The other piece with operations is making sure that you've got the automated systems. And again, that's where a tool like Playground can come in. You've got to make sure that you have automated systems. There are a ton of centers that I've walked into that they're still tracking their leads on paper. So how do you track like the walk-ins? And they'll show me a sheet of paper, or they'll show me Excel documents, and they're past like it's next to impossible to keep that organized and to keep things rolling in the right space. The other thing from an operational standpoint is you need high level safety protocols. I will not go into details on these, but I'm sure that there's been something that's occurred, at least at one of the centers that's on here. We get phone calls and emails every single day that they're looking basically for not necessarily our advice on how to handle the situation. We're typically alerted to keep an eye to see if there's any negative press that comes out. How do we respond? More kind of PR disaster control. But when I've asked them to send me their handbook, send me their standard operating procedures on like locking doors and letting people in and cameras and swiping in and out, and do you have drug testing with your staff or not, which that's becoming a whole nother can of worms. Like there's all these levels from the operational side that a lot of centers usually have the O aspect. This is usually the one that they have most dialed in. They normally have it dialed to where it's pretty well running like a well-oiled machine. I mean, especially curriculum and things like that. But the level that I tend to see from an operational standpoint where things start to move in the wrong direction is if they're missing kind of more of the strategy stuff, more of the what does the next 6 months look like? What does the next 3 months look like? What are some of those key metrics that you're tracking? So one big action item, if you're not doing this right now, is you want to have your list, and we'll talk about accounting in a minute, but you want to have your list of 3, 5, 10, whatever the magic number works best for your center, those metrics that you're looking at every single week. And one of the core metrics from the operational standpoint we're looking at is a marketing metric. How many new leads are coming in? How many tours did we do? How many new enrollments? How many registrations? I mean, there's 4 right there. You can track number of testimonials. There's a ton of stuff that you can be tracking. But you want to make sure that you have these in a place where you're looking at them on a regular basis. A lot of center owners, they're looking at things almost as if it were too late, to where it's a month or 2 or 3 months later, and oh gee, we didn't realize that month we only had, I don't know, 10 tours the whole month, for example, when historically we should have had 50. And you don't realize that until it's a little bit too late. So simplicity, you can have these in, I mean, Google Docs, for example, Google Sheets, to where you're looking at them on a regular basis. There's obviously a lot more ways to make it more complex, but I manage every one of my businesses through KPIs, key performance indicators. We have a yellow, red, green system. Is it, way off track? Is it on track? So you want to make sure you're executing that. Obviously, quality control, depending on your curriculum, food, standard of cleaning, all of that good stuff. But again, I have seen a lot of centers that they don't have this as a process. So if we're trying to build a moat, and again, this concept of a moat is you're kind of in another league than everyone else. Your center is like impenetrable, to where no one can kind of cross that moat. And if they're going to try, it's going to be very challenging. The only way that you're going to accomplish that is to have these 4 areas firing on all cylinders and moving in the right direction. Now, as I continue to talk and throw a few more ideas at you, I don't want you to be like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start. Pick whichever letter, marketing, operations, accounting team, whichever one that you feel you're typically the weakest at. Now, if you were to say, well, Michael, tell me how you really feel, where would you personally start? I always start with marketing. The reason I always start with marketing is that marketing produces and creates cash. That cash then creates options that you can use to pay your team better, hire better talent, make those improvements that are needed from a quality standpoint. But unless you have the cash flow to do it, you're going to continue to be in this perpetual cycle. The reason that I suggest looking at where you're the weakest, it's tough for me to say focus on marketing if you're like, oh, Michael, I don't even know what a profit and loss statement is. And I'm not trying to knock the industry. I'm sharing things literally. We've worked with thousands of centers. And most people get in this because they want to do good. You want to help the community, help kids. I probably would say 25% of the people that we work with, they started the business because they wanted to have a different level of care for their kids. And then all of a sudden they're in the childcare business. But they often don't think about each of these different areas. And then it becomes a place where you've got to make some tough decisions. The next letter, move this over, is A. So accounting. There's a lot of different things that you can do from an accounting standpoint, but to me, it's really the backbone of Moat. You've got to make sure that your business is financially healthy. And there are several aspects to this that you've got to have just dialed in, laser focused. So budgeting and forecasting, detailed budgets, detailed forecasts. So we're looking at this every single week. Our in-house team, they're updating the forecasts, they're updating based on budgets, based on performance, where things are looking so that we can pivot quickly if we need to pivot. Cash flow, I mean, that's the lifeblood at your center. So it's the lifeblood. So making sure that you have a great system to track. So I went through and became a Profit First consultant, another amazing book, Profit First, if you haven't read that one. If you were to say, Michael, I am not taking a salary, that's one huge challenge. A lot of centers, when I look at the financial side, they are practicing what I call kind of bank account accounting. They log in, great, there's 100 grand in the bank account, I'm rich. A week later, oh crap, I forgot payroll, and now you're down to 70,000. Oh geez, I forgot we got to make a tax payment, and now you're down to 30,000. And so they're logging in, and then you get great. Now the next round of tuition checks came in. Now we're rich again, and it's that up and down, up and down. The profit first mentality is very different. You're putting profit aside, and it's just a very different way to operate. Financial reporting, you've got to make sure that you're getting those reports. A lot of our centers, they meet with their accounting person, their bookkeeper once a month. That's a great framework at the very least. Once a month, you want to have that cadence, but you want to make sure that you understand everything and not just, oh, okay, great, I get it, and then you move on. The last aspect is team. And then I might share one or two other slides just on marketing because that's where I always tend to suggest people focus. So obviously this is a people business. I mean, your team they're the heart of your center. This is the number one cost outside typically of if you have a lease or a building, but usually, I mean, your payroll, your team, this is going to be at the top. So you've got to make sure that you're investing the right amount in your team. And this is one where I get a lot of pushback from centers where I'll almost always, not all the time, but almost always when we look at comp. So we do a ton of recruiting for centers. So we help them with the marketing, but a lot of them are like, I need more staff before I can take on more enrollments. So the first step before we can start that is looking at their job ads and looking at their compensation. And almost every center, I have pushed them to raise their pay. Now, the downside in raising pay, you can't just do it for new hires, because you're going to have, like, it's all heck is going to break loose at your center. People are going to say, well, you're starting this person at $18 an hour and I'm making $16.50 and I've been here for 2 years. So you have to, and this is not just a simple thing that I'm suggesting. I'm making it sound easier than it is. But most centers are not paying their staff enough to keep them. And if you were to do a survey 5 years ago and say, well, what's important to you in a job? 3, 4, 5 years ago, it was things like growth opportunities, learning, making an impact, work-life balance, all of the good stuff, fluffier stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with any of those. I love all those. Now the survey has came out in the last 12 months. The number one thing is pay. So pay wasn't even on like the top. I think came in at like number 8. Pay is now number 1. So if you know that you're not paying your staff, and then if I push you back to you and say, you got to pay more, and you say, I can't, then the area that you have off is most likely somewhere on the accounting side. So like all of these different things, the key performance indicators, they're going to give you the metrics, the attempt, like this is where if all your profitability is very low, the average center right now is making less than 10% net profit. So if I'm doing simple math, I know there's centers of all different shapes and sizes. So if you were a family center and you were forecasting $150,000, your net is typically going to be in and around $15,000. The better centers that we're working with, they're typically in the 15 to 20% range. But the area on the accounting side that's typically off is you're not charging enough. If your tuition, either you're not full and you're maximizing and having profitable ratios, or you're just not charging enough. And usually it's a combination of both. And that is one of the first things that I recommend to almost every single center, regardless of if we're working with them or not, unless your tuition is in a different league than everybody else. And there's a few of those that we work with where in the market area, their tuition is like, they provide next level service so they can command it. But if the average center right now, our average is about $1,000 a month, $250 a week for a full-time equivalent enrollment. That's across the entire US. That's not New York where I live, but that's the average currently. If you're at $550 a month, or we had a center yesterday that I talked to on the phone, she's at $150 a week. You're not going to be able to make this a profitable venture. The other thing is looking at your team, you've got to make sure that you're taking a salary for yourself. That needs to be factored in. That's not part of the 10% or the 15%. So this team aspect of being able to pay your team more, I took that little sidebar to say that normally the financial numbers make it very hard for me to come to you and say, raise everyone's comp by $1 an hour, for example. But if you want your people happy, you've got to make sure that you're paying them a little bit more than everyone else in the area. If they can walk and go into Starbucks and make more money, and a lot of your staff is most likely in their early 20s, it's beginning to get harder and harder for them to justify that, even if they love kids. So being able to invest in your team, to me, is absolutely critical. From a recruitment standpoint, you want to make sure that you're not just hiring people that are qualified, but you want to share that painted picture that I talked about. You want to go through that exercise and share it so they're excited and they're like, oh, I can buy into what you're trying to do here. Training and development is critical, but what I don't want you to do is only think about topics that are relevant to your center. So, Michael, what do you mean by that? I want you to think of training and development as whatever you can do to help your team be happier, healthier, financially stable. There's another, I'm a big reader. To my right over here, I've got at least 500 books. We have a rule at our company that you need to spend at least 150 hours a year at minimum in personal and professional development. And I've rolled out a challenge at the beginning of every single year since I've had this company. No one has came close, where I challenge somebody to do more personal and professional development than I do, and no one has ever came close. I mean, there's some weeks that I crank down 25 hours. I mean, then that's, you're in the car in the mornings listening to audiobooks and things like that. I want you to take that same mindset for yourself, but for your team. How can you help them get better, be better people, not just giving them, oh, this is, you can be a better teacher or an assistant teacher or cook or director. As they get better, what ends up happening in this, as I've been sharing things, hopefully you're noticing my energy is changing a bit on this exact one. And this to me would be probably one of your biggest takeaways, hopefully. Our secret sauce, like our retention is through the roof. We pay our team better than pretty much any center, but we do that because we charge more. So we can do that. However, we care more about our team's dreams than anyone. So I know I've dropped 2 other books, three others: Double Double, Vivid Vision, Profit First. One of my top 5 favorite books is a book called Dream Manager. And we have a dream program at our company to where we assign them a dream coach. And once a quarter, they have a coaching session with our dream coach. Think of it as a life coach, business coach, helping them, making sure that they're advancing in life. Our average team member at my marketing business has been here for 7.5 years. At our center, I would say it's probably closer to 5. But we don't often have people leaving because we do things that nobody else is doing. So if you want to hire, retain really great people, you've got to do things that are different, unlike what everybody else is doing. I mean, just making sure that you've got a great environment. You want to do, again, just fun extra things that are kind of outside the box. We have fun culture days every other week. I'm a huge fan. If you haven't noticed some of the props behind me, my favorite show still to this day is The Office. So we literally have a party planning committee, and we plan a party once a month. So we do, and there are always different fun themes and just different stuff. And there's a difference of having a little party and buying breakfast for your staff. Breakfast is nice, but we try and make it fun, different. There's just a lot of different things that you can do to make sure you're retaining those great people. I'm going to share one other marketing tactic. I'm just going to look at my last ones, and then I'll take any questions. I wanted to keep this right around a half hour because I know people tend to kind of get overwhelmed, but I'm going to share, just going to look at my slides here. I'm going to do this one. So if you were to ask me if you could pick only one marketing tactic, what would that tactic be? So there's a lot of ways to drive new enrollments. It's our bread and butter. It's what I've been doing till the cows come home. Been doing it for way too long. But the one area that I think centers are the weakest at, but the good news with that, if you're the weakest, or centers are weak in general, it presents an opportunity for whatever center wants to jump on this trend. So content marketing, this is where I put, at least, personally speaking. So you know my background, owns a bunch of childcare centers. I've got 6 other businesses that are not childcare centers, marketing agency, recruiting, staffing. We've got a bookkeeping, all these different businesses. I personally still spend 50% of my week doing content, producing content in all different shapes and sizes. So the more content you're putting out, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be you're hiring a video studio or anything like that. But you want to look at how you can take whatever you're doing from a content perspective and multiply it by a factor of 10. So if you're putting stuff out, whatever, once a day, like how could you be publishing on all the different platforms, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on X? Our favorite platform right now where we're crushing it with paid advertising is TikTok. So how can you actually create fun content that's engaging. And it's, well, Michael, what if our target market doesn't see it? It's not, that's not the most important aspect. You're taking the content and you're getting it out on different platforms, but it's all free. Doesn't cost anything to post content on Facebook or TikTok. It's all free stuff. And this little area on the marketing side is the one that I would suggest. If I could only pick one, this is where I would put all of my eggs in that particular basket. So I'm going to pause there, take any questions. If I can ever be of any help, you're always welcome to shoot me a message at any time. My direct email is michael@nojokemarketing.com. Parentmarketing.com is our main organization, but always happy to help, brainstorm, share ideas, thoughts, and all that good stuff. So I'm going to pause there and happy to take a question or two and then let everyone kind of get back to your afternoons.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. That was awesome. Awesome content. Gina is asking the chat, any idea how a resource center can market to childcare providers so they're more interested and excited about taking trainings such as this? So how do you get buy-in from staff?
Yeah, I
or
mean,
program?
so we candidly we bribe them. So bribe them by a couple things. Number one, we'll typically have something where if you show up early, we're going to give prizes. So we try and condition our audience to where they have to come out early, and we're giving out good stuff, like not tchotchkes, I guess. So like good prizes, Starbucks gift cards. I'll find what local bakery they're going. Like, we try and give away a couple of good things. During the presentation, we're doing the same thing. So we start to kind of train our list that we're giving stuff away. I know that you might not be thinking that as the best strategy, but that's the one that we have found has worked best. From a timing standpoint, I've tried every single time to do training. We've done 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock, noon, lunchtime. We've tried every single time, and what we've found is it's day by day. Every day is different. Some of our bigger centers, I just got off the phone a little bit earlier with one of them. They've got a bunch of locations in New York City, and both of her directors are in classrooms today. Like, they had, I don't know, 6 teachers, a couple of teachers that were off, and then like 3 or 4 teachers got sick. So had I been doing some content and they're supposed to be coming on, they're obviously not going to show up. So we normally don't get huge attendance live, but bribing people with some gifts, giving away some free stuff definitely has worked quite a bit. But most of our people watch the recordings. The other thing that we do is we use GoToWebinar typically. We'll do simulated live. So we'll offer the same presentation 3 or 4 times during the course of the week. I'll do it live once, and then they can go and pick a different time, and it's simulated live. Like, I'm doing this live, but you could essentially, whatever. Hey, I know a lot of you couldn't make Monday at 3 o'clock. I'm going to do another one of these, whatever, Friday afternoon, and hopefully it's a little bit quieter for you. So register here, and then it's literally just a simulated live. It seems like it's live. You got to get a little bit better at how you say certain things. Like, you can't be like happy Monday or something, or happy Wednesday when it's done on a Friday, but we'll normally offer the same training at minimum 3 or 4 times during 2 weeks. So we'll get whatever, 20 people here, 80 here, 30 here, but most of it comes from people watching it in the evenings, weekends. It's getting harder and harder and harder for people to break away, unfortunately.
And Gina, I would also say, yeah, like Michael's saying, plenty of live trainings, but plenty of on-demand trainings that are available, and definitely leverage those because it's just more flexible for people's schedules. You can also factor in, I know some providers do half days where they have professional development, and that's part of the program. The kids go home early and they just do 2 or 3 hours of professional development programming.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, unless it's like mandated from the top, like the owners are like, hey, all of our directors, you're getting a training, whatever, every once a month on Monday afternoons. You can kind of figure out and laser in when those are and get yourself on their ticket. That's always a good way as well. Any
Yeah,
other
I mean, it's
questions?
tough.
Go ahead, Benny, please.
The question. I'm curious, Michael, on the point of content. You are very bullish on content. Why are you so bullish about it?
Sure. So a couple of reasons. So when I look at, so we traditionally, most marketing people are going to say the best strategy to use is paid traffic. So Facebook ads is what everybody talks about right now. That's all they want to talk, like Facebook ads, Facebook ads. And Facebook ads are good. They're fine. It wouldn't be my top choice if I were doing paid traffic. But when I look at where the enrollments are actually coming from, when I look at a center, let's just say center's investing, I don't know, $2,000 a month in marketing, and they're doing some organic, some social media, some website optimization, some Facebook, Google, a little bit of everything. At the end of the day, I only care about enrollments. So we're going to look at lead numbers, and we can generate a ton of leads from Facebook at $10 a lead, for example, in some locations. But when I look at who actually ends up enrolling, the enrollments are coming from organic. They're coming from people that came to the website, fill out a form. They're traditionally not coming from someone that saw an ad on Facebook. Now, there are some, but we're typically talking 7 or 8, even 9 times to 1. So from a content side, content is definitely helping with organic. So I didn't talk about going to Google and making sure your website's optimized. I mean, if you're not showing up for preschool near me, pre-K near me, daycare near me, if you're Montessori center near me, if you're not only your Google listing doesn't show up and your website, you've got some work to do. That's where most of the enrollments for our centers are coming from those little map listings and the website traffic. And we found the best way that we're able to keep those numbers growing is by putting out more content. And historically, the best content has been video. So if I can convince the directors to do a weekly video, the teachers to do something fun, and obviously, I mean, I'm oversimplifying in this initial presentation, but making sure that people have signed disclosures and things like that. So you're not just randomly filming kids, that they've agreed to be filmed, but I mean, here's my whatever Tuesday teaching tip, and putting that stuff on. And then that goes on your website, and it's on the organic social reach right now has been going through the roof. So it's one of those times when I look at, is there a good time to kind of double down or triple down on a particular tactic? Right now, it's organic social. That's where we're getting the love. That's where we're getting the enrollments. It's free. A lot of
Yeah.
centers, I mean, a lot of centers, unfortunately, they don't have the budgets that they need to be competitive on like Facebook ads. You can't throw $200 a month at it. I mean, those
And I
days
think
have been over.
another big thing there is just getting started today. And the thing with organic content, from what I've realized as well, is it just takes time for people to find it, for it to rank in these engines, and it doesn't happen overnight like paid might. And therefore, the best time to start was yesterday, the next big time is today, and just putting stuff out. Eventually things will get traction.
Yeah, the algorithm, like TikTok. I mean, they have arguably one of the best algorithms right now, of like based on like it's changing based on everything. And I mean, in simplicity, it's if you're liking certain content, if you're looking for it, knows what you're starting to look for and starts to show that stuff up. So eventually your content will be found. But the key though is the consistency. When I look at a lot of centers' social media accounts, they don't have the consistency. They'll be posting 2 or 3 times a week on Facebook, and they've got 0 videos on YouTube. There's absolutely nothing on TikTok. I mean, LinkedIn that's where we're grabbing more of our directors on the recruiting side from LinkedIn than anywhere else. So, and that's also not, if you're in certain areas, there's a lot of people that are on LinkedIn that they're going to read an article about the 7 ways that you're providing the best quality of care for kids, for example. I mean, if you're in Palo Alto, or I mean, certain areas where there's a lot of executives that are near your center, they're going to start to find that content. So And I know it's easier said than done. I mean, I know time is limited, but the good thing with this strategy is it's just a time one. And it's pretty easy to record content with your iPhone. You don't need fancy equipment. And you can literally have an iPhone. There's a new iPhone, I believe, coming out in 2 weeks. The camera will probably be even better than this one. So you don't need anything to move that needle. But video has been where I would suggest you focus from content.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, Gina said thank you in the chat, and I think with that, we have no more questions. So Michael, thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. Really, really great information. We'll record it, send it to everyone that registered, and make it available on our website as well. So anyone that wants to watch it can access this for future trainings as well. You are muted, but thank you very much, and have a good day to everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry, rookie mistake.
Yeah,
See you
take
guys.
care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.